I have the sense that this is going to be one of those talks that really has the spiral quality. So bear with me, we'll get there. I think we'll get to the crux, the central impulse, but I think it might be a spiraling sort of walk. The feminine way. But I thought I'd start, and some of you have heard this already, at Sharon's retreat this fall. A friend of ours, I think she asked a few people, I don't think it was special to me or anything, but she did at the beginning of retreat just ask, yeah? Yeah, I can tell there's no sound for now. I'd go to audio settings, Ty, like the little, no, I'd go to that with those little earphones and
That's clear.
but it's not, it shouldn't be earphones. Press that little,
Recording in progress.
there you go. Now unmute. You guys hear me now? Yeah. Thank you. So at Sharon's fall retreat, I think this beautiful friend of ours had asked a few of us, or maybe everyone, the Sangha in general, to just hold something for her, and if anything came forward to, bring it to her during retreat. And something did come forward, but it's really meant a lot to me as well. And it's a gardening metaphor, because that's how it works here in the inner vision. But just a description of the empty quality, the unknowing quality of the naturalness that is the origin expressing through our each unique individuation. A few years ago, I planted columbine in the rose garden. I thought it would be pretty to see the airy columbine amongst the rose bushes. Roses need loamy, rich soil and about an inch of water every week. Those conditions for roses bring lots of blooms and strong plants that are more resistant to bugs and disease. Each year, the columbine migrate a bit further out of the rose bed, creeping towards the rocks around the bed where they naturally thrive. They have more blooms and less rot in their roots in dry, hot, less fertile ground. Beyond reason and self-consciousness, beyond reason and beyond self-consciousness, individuation occurs very naturally. The columbine don't appear to be saying no to the roses or yes to the rocks. They just find their way, unknowingly, moved by something greater than reason and concept, without opposition or conceptual positions. We don't see caterpillars pacing the parking lot when it's time to enter that dark transmutation. The heart of the heart, the ground at the heart of matter, doesn't know anything about opening and closing and yes and no. It's spacious, immediate, responsive, and the divine expressions emanating are informed by, through, and as the majesty and glory of the root origin as it comes into creation. A rose is a rose is a rose. A columbine is a columbine is a columbine. You are what you are what you are what you are. The expression grows best with the conditions that God set forth for her blooming. And the heart knows what it knows beyond reason. I'm always kind of wondering what the balance is between like personal anecdotes and, I'm always doing my very, very best to speak from direct experience. That's the way in our lineage. But sometimes I'm leaving out the like specifics of a very personal journey because it's a little trick with teaching. So there was not an awareness here of this process that we call ego. I'd heard the word ego, obviously, and we have an idea of it, and I'm not saying that it was unknown in an intellectual way. But it became very clear as it fell away what it had been and how consciousness had oriented itself around it and orbited. Around 25 years ago, there was an event in this life, in this case, that was so mind-bending and heart-rending and unexplainable and dark, where, when a relationship was unraveling that had been a primary relationship, a committed partner type relationship, the person I was in relationship with decided to take his life. So the ego structure just couldn't manage that. And I know many people have had lots of on their knees type dissolving of the ego structure. It doesn't happen that way for everybody, but here, that was the event that it dismantled this ability to orient and orbit around what I thought had been an intuitive kind of my God, praying to God sort of center. That turned out to be me. Just a conglomeration of beliefs and ideas and thoughts that were innervated through emotionality and belief systems. And when that couldn't stand up to the questioning that had been brought forward through this event, it collapsed. And in this case, it was rather rapid. And that sense of me, if somebody were to ask me, well, I'm a this, and I grew up here, and my name's this, and when this happens, I behave this way, and when that happens, I behave this way, and this is, and I have these political ideas, and I have this, la la la, and that's me, here I am. That evaporated. And the orientation, it was just sort of bereft for a while and unmoored and, a very uncomfortable time, painful. Many, many things were coming into consciousness, regret and life review and, all of the stuff that happens with this change in orientation. I was a hospice nurse at the time, and I had seen this process actually happen a lot, but I wouldn't have known, couldn't directly relate to it until it was happening here at the ends of people's lives. a very similar thing for many people happens, where they're, kind of 1 foot in, 1 foot out, and it all just starts unraveling. You can't really orient to like uh, a solid, this is who I am in this world at this time, and I have like this linear continuity and, all that. So that breaks down however it breaks down for any one of us. And there's this shift. And if we are lucky and fortunate, we can find context somewhere in a book, maybe, or maybe we're part of a Sangha. I was not, but I was kind of alone, but teachers came through writing, through meeting people, that first taste of what it is to have something fall out of the center, the orbiting, center that everything kind of orbits around, came through that dark night. That event that couldn't be reasoned. It couldn't be reasoned. That was the kind of the breaking thing for me. I had a very reasonable personality in a certain sort of way. I mean, kind of wild, but I mean, I could defend, make sense intellectually of most things. Then one day I was in yoga class and I went into Warrior One. This was during the time that I would just, every Shavasana was just sobbing, every getting still, being silent was just tears of agony, really, for the personal situation, for the collective, just everything was raining down. And there was no place for it to be reasoned away, defended away, repressed away, suppressed away. But there was just kind of like no real new orientation yet. And I went into Warrior One and a atomic nuclear explosion filled the emptiness, which I later came to see as a Kundalini thing, but I wouldn't have no idea what that was at the time. What I knew it was that I was now in the lap. I called it the lap of God. It was from this bereft, unoriented, no more me, but still a definite personal identity. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't the no self that happens eventually, but there was still somebody there experiencing all of it as an experiencer. And this vision, perception, was absolutely, and I use that word very definitely, absolutely love. There was nothing that could touch it. I mean, the people who, were in my life at the time would say, well, isn't that terrible? And this is happening. And I didn't mean it cavalierly or sarcastically or snarkily. What would come forward was not in my world. It's not in my world. I couldn't, and the intellectual capacity here, for whatever reason, just was gone. That referencing system where we perceive and then we reference and then we name had been kind of blown out with the, so there was just was love. it was obvious, like this obvious. It was so obvious. And then I went to a workshop with a teacher who had been quite instrumental in several of our lives, with archetypal work and exploring the shadow side of the psychological self and all of that. And I went to a workshop with her in Chicago, and there was a moment where she was standing in front of the room and she began to talk about how if we don't get our shit together as the human race, it's apocalypse, it's annihilation, it's the end of the world, it's da 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 da. And I experienced the fall. Where the truth of what is abandoned for the separate self's sake of the need, it's strange, the need to be somebody in a something world doing something that it, in response to, what the misery, this, the whatever it is. It's that garden of, I'm just going to go ahead and use this, that it's a beautiful story, the Garden of Eden, Genesis book 1, not book 2, with all punishing and all that, but where, who told you you were naked? Who told you all this was happening? Well, the divisive mind, eating from the tree of good and evil, eating from the tree of division and separation and this and that. That's the fall. But the years of, and it was years of absolute is, absolute love, uncaused, causeless, never coming and going, perceptually not very navigable, but in the regular sort of way, was so visceral and real and direct. It's changed, but I've never been able to believe in separation again. There's no way to believe that that's actually real. You can't believe it, even though you're experiencing it. It has no actual quality. It's I don't know how to explain it. It's a house of mirrors, like a fun, obviously. So then, things keep unfolding, and the way knows the way. And what began to happen was, while the first, you might say, let's just say that, let's anchor it in time, but it's kind of not like that, but shift in orientation was, monumental. Then this process, and it kind of involved like a, let's say, above the ground pruning, a severe pruning. A lot of pruning was done. I mean, there's no more real ego structure, no belief in any of that. Love had made itself known. Reality was shining, although colored again in kind of big waves, the sticky places, the karmic buttons that for needing to get pushed for this expression. But then began the underground pruning, the pruning of the roots of identity. And for that, I prayed for a guide because it was a deep experience. And my good fortune, I was able to attend. Somebody gave me Aj's book. Somebody gave me Dr. Hawkins' book. I was able to go to Dr. Hawkins' events and Aja events, stand up in front of Aja, get called out of the 350 people, try to make yourself known out there. Oh my God. And I won't tell the whole story because everybody's heard it, but it's a beautiful story. I met Sharon at an Aja retreat and was able to make contact with her during the pruning of the deep roots, is when she came into my life as a guide. I very much encourage a guide for the pruning of the roots of identity. It's one thing to kind of give up that thing that runs you around, the wizard behind the curtain going, do this, do that, this is who you are, da da da, that whole ego structure, thought, belief, up and down, it's a whole nother part of the process to begin trimming those really deeply held identities. Things like to be or not to be identities. Deeply held, deeply unconscious, probably mostly karmic, I don't know. Identities that have seemed noble and true. The healer, the mother, people when I would go to hospice houses would call me an angel, the angel, different deal. The way knows the way, the wayless way, running the show the whole time. And those really rooted identities, the one who experiences, the experiencer. That was a huge one here. I loved my big experiences. Starts getting emptier, emptier, emptier. There's some phases that seem, at least here, maybe not for you, but I hear this now. I hear this in sessions. I'm without will. I'm without volition. I'm without any kind of juicy stuff. I'm just kind of some of it can hit like you go to sleep, experiencing the love and beauty through the experiencer, and you wake up and everything is dead. And if you've never been in these phases, unfoldings, that you can remember anyway, then it just, what I'm trying to bring forward is like what we read through with the Radiant Sutras, the in-breath, the out-breath, the emptying, the filling. As the process goes, there will be less and less and less and less to orient around. No place to land, no place to hide, no defense to grab, no identity to make us feel big. It just becomes naturally migrating, creeping along to its natural shining. It's natural shining, which will not necessarily be, well, eventually there's nobody there to think about like what it should look like. Well, it should be this because that's what I dreamed about my entire life and I knew it was going to help humanity and myself and all the stuff. And that, isn't available. It's irrelevant and doesn't come into consciousness. That sense of someone doing something. It's spacious immediacy. It's not like there's relatively nothing happening. I'm going to go ahead and use this word. It maybe gets a little overused in ways that I don't relate to. But like the mystic that wrote The Cloud of Unknowing. If any of you have enjoyed that piece of writing, it's an unknowingness, the way the Columbine are migrating to what the reality is serving up every single moment, now, the original blueprint. We think we have a problem. Right here, right now is the solution. If we can only be as it is. But that's the trick, to be as it is. It took me years to realize when I was saying that, people thought that I meant just indulge in whatever the ego is. Just like be as closely related to the ego's idea of what is as you possibly can. And I didn't realize that that's how it was coming across. Because here that capital I, capital S is divine essence love informing without conceptual reason, personal identity, ideas, the trance of shame, the trance of unworthiness, the trance of not enoughness, the trance of not belonging, all of that gone. That whole house of cards done. Being as is, capital I, capital S, is what we've been speaking about, anchoring, I will not be moved in and as and from and through source, and then giving way. Giving way. Eventually, this is all happening very, very naturally, very spontaneously. You couldn't create it or manufacture it or practice it if you wanted to. And yet, things will come in a life where you're reminded, now wait a minute, is the life really expressing from the deepest remembering here? Or have the little grippers very subtly gripped back on for safety reasons? You know, here is, you know, the latest big pruning was, you know, a big familial thing that included, you know, sisters divorcing sisters, and I mean, various forms of familial war. So like that beautiful piece of writing that Sharon shared, there, it's returning to love. All is returning, all is returning, all is returning. The unknowingness, the emptiness, if you want to call it that, the spacious, immediate availability. And the capacity to, if you find yourself up here in the narration, to down, just go down right in the moment. I found myself sometimes just saying, just give me a sec here, in whatever situation I was in, and moving here, where wholeness is. Wholeness is. True nature is. Causeless love is. Harmony is. If we indulge the, I'm not doing it good enough, I can't, they're getting it, I'm not, I'm a failure, we are the ego is just kind of coming in the back door. It's a collective trance. It has a trance-like quality to it. This unworthiness thing. It keeps that separate sense well fed. It keeps it well fed. It's kind of a backdoor way, but it, you know, it keeps a contrast going. See, because all the contrast, there's no contrast anymore. In this view, you can't get a distance going to objectify anything. Do you hear what I'm saying? You can't objectify anything. There's no distance that occurs, so there's just no ability. There's no ability. So that however these roots of identity get fed, but a lot of times I just see it over and over and over and over again. It's through a sense of not belonging, not enough, not worthy. However it gets fed, it keeps a sense of, a false sense of aliveness. It's a false sense of aliveness. When you start getting close to the current of the radiance that is birthing creation, it can feel really very overwhelming. And so, heroically, we have many processes that will kick in and go, no, 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 sweetheart. Save the ship. You're circling the drain. Don't do it. It's not evil. It's not strategically the evil ego or like anything like that. It actually is very innocent in a survival capacity sort of way. Very innocent. When we see that, really see that, there's so much compassion that naturally arises for that mistaken identity. It's like, oh, I got you. The strange thing becomes, you remember it, but it still kind of feels a little weird, even though it's very obvious, is that the eventual redemption, which means return to originality. That's what it means. That's what the word redemption means. Return to originality. The eventual redemption of this dimension is beyond belief. And it's beyond a ego structure's capacity to do enough good to save the world. It's beyond ideas, and it is beyond separation or any notion of coming and going, this, that. Certainly beyond them and us. Relinquishing or surrendering, letting go, giving way. I don't know, find your beautiful word for it. But I like the word surrender. When it very first was being encountered in a direct way here, when I would write about it, it would always be giving way. It's just how it felt. It wasn't always comfortable at all. I'm not even going to go into the many stories of that because it's too, this particular thing was real scary, but this is why I would really encourage going to retreat, finding a guide that you're working with, a teacher, a sangha, because the stakes, Ajahn always used to say that, get higher and higher, you know? As far as if we abandon the remembering of who we are, the pain, that it's not in punishment at all. It's like a natural consequence of, what did the Mary Magdalene scripture say, of embracing what deceives us. It's a natural consequence of it. It's not a punishment thing. It's not like the Old Testament thing, gig. Dr. Hawkins always talked about how, his whole big thing was transcending the levels of consciousness, where you go from the depths of suicidal agony to, rising, not in a I'm better, I'm special, I'm ascending, you're not sort of way. It's just a way of expressing it. It can feel like an upward rise, or it can feel like a descent. To courage, the willingness to give up the victim stance, huge one, huge hoop of power, giving up the victim stance and deciding to trust and question these little boxed in ideas and identities. And but a big hoop of power, a big transcending, and I think it corresponds to the gates in Buddhism, is the transcending of reason and moving in to the realm and dimension of grace. The laws are different. The view is different. The sense of self is dramatically different. But we have roots in those deep roots. Whether we believe it or not, it's just part of our heritage, our collective heritage as human beings in this day and age, is that whole I think, therefore I am, and how that's promoted through all of our schooling as an actual identity, as an actuality, and whether we've consciously bought into it or not. In unknowingness. This is the humility and the humbleness that is talked about in all paths, and I feel, that the ego really misunderstands. Can't understand. There's no sense of a loss of anything when one returns to when that homecoming happens, where God or source, love, is the only power, and it's given way. It's given the vessel. There's no, whatever that step is in the 12 steps. What is it? I admit I'm powerless, and, giving everything to the higher power. just acknowledging that that's the truth. There's no, it's a relief. It's the laying down of the burden of identified consciousness and having to hold the whole thing up. Maintain all the defendedness. I get that an undefended heart feels really like, whoa. In the world, but not of the world. In the world, but not of the world. Anchored in the subtle origin and a vessel for the harmony that naturally begins to erode all separation and the separate view, And when we are no longer seeing the separate view, it will not exist, because it matters in the sense of matter. It matters how we see it. And I'm not talking about bypassing and Pollyanna, New Age, which is just another, I think, therefore I am, using the mentality to, like, fabricate pink Cadillacs and stuff. I'm not on that track. It works to a certain extent. It's limited. And I'm doing my best to, which is all that is, to point to something that is so far beyond limits, it's unimaginable. It just exists as a pure potentiality that has no other eyes, hands, ears, feet, body other than this. There was a Sufi mystic named Iqbal, and I don't really know, he's like probably a contemporary or maybe even a predecessor of Rumi. I've loved this for a long time, and it continues to reveal here, unfold in this eternal way. Who can tell what miracles love, capital L, love, has in store for us, if only we have the courage to become as it is. Everything we think we know now is only the beginning of another knowing that itself has no end. And everything we can now accomplish will seem negligible to us when the power of our divine nature flowers in glory and acts through us. And from the Prajnaparamita, the Bodhisattva's mind is not frightened by the total absence of any recognizable, definable, or findable being called a Bodhisattva. Thank you. Thank you.